My name is Dr. Jessica Journeay, and I received my PhD in communication studies. And my main focus of interest and research centered around media's effect on romantic relationships, particularly in the domain of pornography, and the way that we see that new form of media not only has gained so much popularity and is just ubiquitous online, but is also really negatively affecting romantic relationships. And so we're seeing those trends both on the effects on the user themselves as well as within the interpersonal dynamic of relationships. And so some of the research trends are nuanced, but on the whole, we're seeing in quantitative studies, which gather survey based information from participants and analyze trends in society, we're seeing negative trends with quantitative research. Even meta analyses that look at a collection of quantitative research studies are showing those same trends. And that's a more rigorous form of research because it takes a collection of these studies and says, oh, okay, yeah, we are seeing this. Whereas in some qualitative studies, there have been a mix of positive and negative effects that participants are reporting in interviews or when they're responding to open ended questions on surveys and things like that. So there are some nuanced trends, but on the whole, we're seeing a negative effect, particularly in heterosexual romantic relationships. Or it's like there have been some reports of couples who use porn together in the bedroom that report positive effects on sexual satisfaction. But if a man is solitarily using pornography in a relationship, it trends negative. We see in quantitative based research studies is that users who frequently consume pornography, there are a host of negative effects that are associated with more frequent use of pornography. So a lot of this is correlational data, which just looks at what are the relationships between these variables. And some of them are experimental studies that show causal links. But on the whole, we'll say like these things are associated with more pornography use. So there's a relationship there. And those things include impersonal sex, like casual hookup sex, or kind of desiring less personal sexual interaction outside of maybe the confines of a committed romantic relationship, the hookup culture, more sexist attitude. So that's associated with more frequent pornography use, more favorable perceptions of infidelity in relationships, also more objectification of others. We're seeing trends in depression and anxiety being associated with pornography use. So again, with some of these, it's correlational, meaning the relationship is going up or down, but we're not necessarily seeing maybe one is affecting the other. At the same time, there could be affects both ways. So I'm not saying necessarily porn is causing all of those things, but we are seeing those things rise as porn frequency goes up, if that makes sense. And then as it relates to romantic relationships, there are a host of negative issues we see when a man is using pornography in a heterosexual romantic relationship. We see a effect on them in terms of their sexual satisfaction within the relationship and on their partner's sexual satisfaction. And it also has negative relationship satisfaction effects. So feeling less fulfilled sexually and within the relationship with higher levels of porn use. Then we also see women who perceive that their partner uses pornography experience body image disturbance issues. So they feel worse about their body, and women also develop eating disorder symptomatology due to that behavior. We also are seeing trends in the research that women can feel or experience feelings of infidelity with their partners, cyber use of pornography. And I think at the heart of that is really with pornography use, there's a lot of shame that's associated with it, even though it's very normalized in our culture. And it's something that I think a lot of people kind of try to write off and say, oh, well, this is a very form income of media, like whatever, it's not that big of a deal. But in reality, we are seeing negative effects. And I do think it's a big deal in a committed romantic relationship. If a partner is lying about a certain behavior, especially a sexual behavior, it does feel to women like a betrayal or like an infidelity. They rate it very similarly to in person. infidelity. So yeah, those are some of the major effects that we're seeing in the quantitative research space, social scientific research about this topic. The term that I typically hear is sexual scripting theory. It's this idea that if my perception of sexuality is only coming from the content I'm viewing with pornography, and I'm maybe starting to view that at a very young age, early adolescence, or even younger in some instances, and then I'm not also receiving healthy sexual education or an adult that's kind of saying, oh, that's not actually what typically people in healthy romantic relationships usually engage in sex, unless both people are like agreeing to have those kind of dynamics, then some of this is actually very harmful and could be perceived abuse in cases, right? Like sexual choking or things like that. It would be really important to check in with a partner before you would engage with something like that. And in pornography, it's so normalized. And so if children are not receiving other sex education about healthy relationship patterns and consent, then yeah, unfortunately, that does really warp their perception of sexual intimacy. And so we see rates like a lot of health communication scholars are looking at the rates of like condomless sex, hookup sex as well, and then like instances of sexual choking or things that are very pervasively portrayed in pornography that clearly can have a very negative impact on real relationships if both consenting adults aren't consenting to those dynamics. So there have been a couple scholars, but the ones that are coming to mind particularly are Tilke and Kroon van Diest. And I believe one of their studies was they're a bit outdated, but one of the studies was 2015, and then I think they had a follow-up study, a couple years later, a year or 2 later. So although I mentioned these negative trends being seen in quantitative research, there are also negative experience that are being shared in qualitative research too. There's just more of a mix. There are some positive, some negative, some neutral kind of thing. Women will also share in some qualitative studies the negative effects of their body image and how they view their body image that can lead to, yeah, eating disorder symptomatology. So, wanting to restrict yourself or wanting to exercise more in a more unhealthy, motivated way due to a partner's use of pornography, kind of trying to match the ideal that's depicted in pornography, the body ideal in mainstream pornography. I have a lot of compassion for people who struggle with pornography use because I think that it's playing on this natural human desire for connection and intimacy with others. Unfortunately, it just warps that natural desire in a way that leads to more disconnection and less intimacy with others. I do have a lot of compassion there. And I know that users struggle with a lot of shame. And actually, the more shame that you feel regarding this behavior, the worse it gets in some ways. I just wanted to also say that if this is something that you are struggling with, you're in good company, but there are helpful tools such as Ever Accountable that can really help you overcome this behavior and form new habit patterns in your life and also rewire your brain and how you're considering or thinking about intimacy because content does affect us. Media does affect us. Some of the effects in the research we see are smaller effects, but that's not to discount. They still are impacting our views of the world and how we make sense of who we are and who other people are. So, particularly with women who are sexualized in pornography and in the media, we've seen a large amount of research that suggests that when we view that content, we do see them as objects. We no longer see them as humans. And it dehumanizes those people. And so that has an effect. That has an effect on then how you view other people in your real life. And so if you're seeking true connection and intimacy and honestly better sex, I think pornography is a great thing to reduce and walk away from, honestly. The negative effects far outweigh the potential positive effects, in my personal opinion, in terms of the way that it can hurt intimacy. But I would say my personal perspective that it's essential, regardless of what people's views are, that they have open and honest dialogue with their romantic partners about their perceptions of pornography. because when there is that discrepancy in use and also in perception of what pornography means in a relationship, we see a lot of negative effects, which could also include conflict in relationships and even divorce. Highlighting the fact that this is a common issue and struggle that people have. There's no shame in having a temptation or a struggle towards something, but I do think it's important to try to mitigate this behavior so that you can have a healthier, happier life and relationship.